Chess YouTube, just how good is Magnus Carlsen at chess really? I mean, we all know he's the greatest player of all time and whatnot, but like, how good is he actually at the game of chess? In this video, we're going to answer that question by looking at one of his latest games, an absolutely brutal, savage beatdown between Magnus versus the international master Alexander Klebovich. I hope I said his name right, and it's remarkable. I mean, this guy is 2904 online, but Magnus is just in a league of his own, and this game in particular highlights the difference between these two players in a way that you just have to see this game to believe it. It's really remarkable what happens here. All right, in the game, Magnus, knight f3 is the opening choice for Magnus as white. The Reti Opening, a very solid idea, very flexible. White has many ways to play it, the main ones being, a fast g3 or a fast c4 and so on. And black goes knight f6, the copycat variation. Now, black copies white for several moves here. We have g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, castles, castles, c4, c5, knight c3, and knight c6. So far, both sides going for one of the main lines of the English opening, which usually occurs via 1c4, but it can occur via 1 knight f3, the Reti Opening. So pretty solid overall. And what do we have here? Both sides have the fianchetto. They have very solid development, good control over d5 and d4 squares and so on, like this here. But Magnus finally finds a way to kind of break up the symmetry. He plays the move d4. Not a shocker of a move, but what happens next is really remarkable. Obviously, white's idea here is he threatens taking on c5, he threatens d5, he's trying to imbalance the game a little bit and trying to fight for an edge out of the opening. Now, black here has many choices. There is the kind of solid but boring and somewhat drawish option of simply d6. That might be the best move here, but the problem with that from our standpoint is Magnus here could just go for an endgame and just win in the endgame if he wants to. He's the greatest endgame player ever, but fortunately, he doesn't do that, or black doesn't go for it, rather. Instead, black here takes on d4. We have c takes d4, then knight takes. So a little bit of an imbalance in this game so far. The knight on d4 is quite strong, and black has some pressure on it, but a little bit of an imbalance. And black here has many ideas. You can go, for example, d6, the typical dragon Sicilian move. Black's setup so far is sort of like a dragon or an accelerated dragon and so on. You can also go queen to a5, pressuring, the 5th rank and c3 and so on. But instead, he plays the move here, knight to g4, a very ambitious idea by the international master Alexander Klebovich. Now, what is the idea? Well, if you do your CCTOs, you know that the knight on d4 is now under attack twice by the bishop and the knight. I mean, you don't become a GM or an IM by sacking pieces like this, and Magnus here, he sees the threat, and he defends with the move e3. And now the follow-up for black is d6. Then we have knight d to e2, retreating back with that knight. So you go e3, giving the knight some space on e2, then go back. And black here, knight g to e5 is the move. Also going back with that knight. So a very unusual formation here. This knight on e2 and this knight on e5 are both somewhat strangely placed overall, but the game is still roughly level. White does have an edge in the opening, but it's not anything that dramatic. From here, Magnus goes b3. The idea being he wants to fianchetto this bishop as well, and it does make some sense. After all, with the pawn on e3, the bishop here on c1 is probably not going to be that active on this diagonal. Therefore, this one is the best choice right here, most likely. So black here, how does he continue? Well, the main way to get counterplay here as black at some point is going to be going either a5, a4, or a6, b5. It's a very common idea in many, many openings. Black trying to get counterplay on the queen side, white fighting for the center, and so on. But instead, black here plays the move knight to b4. Now, this is a very tricky idea by the IM Alexander Klebovich. The idea being both of these knights are now pressuring the weak d3 square. Either one could jump in right there like this. So Magnus, what does he do in response to this move? Now, most amateur players here would say, you know what, not much I can do. I'm going to go bishop b2 and develop and so on. But of course, that walks right into the trap of black. If bishop b2, black can just jump in with, say, knight e to d3, hit the bishop, and have a lot of pressure on that piece. And it's not very easy as white to find the right follow-up plan. After all, if you move the bishop to, say, a3 or c1, the knight on c3 is then pressured and so on. And things get very difficult very, very fast. Instead, Magnus here, showing his class in this game, plays the move bishop to d2, finding the other square for the bishop. And the point being, of course, he's playing against the idea of knight b4 and then knight d3 from black. Of course, now, if you jump in, there's no attack on the bishop. White can go, for example, rook to b1, getting out of the way of the attack, queen c2, and so on, and white's going to be just fine. So black here has to find some other way to continue. He plays the move bishop g4, lashing out, trying to pressure this knight, black being pretty active so far with very active knights and active bishop, 2 active bishops actually, and, black seems to be doing okay, but Magnus once again finds a way to just swat away the pressure while maintaining the tension in the position. That is sort of the theme of this game. Magnus just keeping the game as complicated as possible and as difficult as possible for the opponent. He simply plays the move here, f3, pushing back the bishop. So the bishop, it goes back to e6, and then we have a3, pushing back this knight as well. The knight, it goes back, knight b to c6 is the idea from black. And now here, as white, I expected Magnus here to play, say, either e4, gaining space, or maybe f4, also gaining space, starting back this knight on the e5 square. But instead, Magnus, as usual, he always seems to find the way to make the game as difficult as possible for the opponent by just maintaining more options, maintaining the tension, and so on. And he does that right here with the simple but really profound idea of knight to f4. Keeping both these pawns back for now, pressuring the bishop, setting up a big threat, taking on e6. Black doesn't want to allow that, obviously. And also eyeing d5 with that knight. So, again, Magnus always finds the way to keep the game as difficult and as complicated as possible for the opponent. Black here, the move is bishop to d7, sliding back with the bishop. And from there, we do have the move rook to c1, sliding over to the c file with the rook. Black does the same, rook c8, and Magnus king to h1. This guy is in no hurry. He knows his game is fantastic. He's got a good setup, and he simply plays king to h1, sliding over with the king, getting off this diagonal here, which could be an issue later in the game with, say, queen b6 ideas and so on. All right, black, a6, threatening b5 ideas and controlling b5 in general, a solid choice. And Magnus finally goes to the move e4. Now, Magnus, he absolutely loves, and I mean loves, this pawn structure right here. He plays it all the time, especially in the English and the Catalan openings as white. And it may seem weird, after all, the bishop on g2 is now being hemmed in by 2 different pawns on f3 and e4. I mean, why would white voluntarily block in his own bishop like this in this very strange looking fashion? Well, the point is, white here has more space. He has very good control over the light squares in general. And with the pawns on light squares, this bishop will become very, very strong. He may go, for example, bishop e3, queen d2, and so on, knight d5 ideas. And Magnus is just slowly but surely pushing his opponent back, gaining more space, and he still has everything under total control. And besides that, he just loves this pawn structure. It's one of his favorites. He plays it all the time as white. So anyways, black here, knight d4, jumping in with that knight to the d4 square, knight d4 on the board. Magnus, bishop b3, not a shocker at all. That is the idea behind e4, or one of them at least. And black here, knight to e6. A very weird looking process here with that knight jumping in, jumping back, and so on. All right, Magnus here, knight fd5. He jumps in, once again, keeping the game as difficult and complicated as possible. He had the option here of trading on e6, but he knows if you do that, that is exactly what the opponent wants. If you trade, black trades back, and black with less pieces on the board has an easier time finding good squares for all his remaining pieces. Therefore, Magnus, instead, he simply maintains the tension, maintains the complexity, knight fd5, avoiding those trades in typical Magnus style. All right, black here finally makes a big strategic mistake. So far in this game, Alexander Klebovic has played a pretty solid game and pretty good for an IM, not yet a GM. But in this position, he plays the move b5, and this is simply asking for trouble. This is what Magnus wants in this game. When he sees a move like this, he is just a shark in the water. He is just ready to pounce. He smells blood, and he knows there's got to be some sort of complication, some sort of tactical idea here to exert even more pressure on the opponent. And there are a variety of things you can do here. You can trade on b5, for example, but instead, Magnus bishop b6 is the move, hitting the queen and driving it back to the e8 square. Black queen to e8, and then again, he does not trade on b5. Oh no, the move is f4, giving that knight a very difficult question. Do you go back to, say, c6? Do you jump into g4? What do you do? I mean, that loses a piece. So obviously, knight c6 is the move here. Knight c6 on the board, but from there, Magnus, he trades on b5, C takes, A takes, and then knight takes. So Magnus finding the way to not just play a random move like taking on b5, but instead pushing back this knight with move f4, blocking the defense of the b5 pawn, and then takes on b5 with c takes, a takes, knight takes. Very, very clever. All right, Klebovich, rook b8 hits the bishop, but for now it is defended by the knight on d5. Therefore, instead, Magnus here plays the move a4, gaining more space. He knows in the long run that pass pawn on the a4 square on the a file is so valuable. If he can just push it down the board to say a5, then a6, then a7, threaten a8, and so on, that's going to be one of the easiest ways to win pretty much ever in chess. All right, black here. Knight c5 is the move, jumping in with that knight. And Magnus, again, as usual, he finds a way to make the game seemingly as complicated as humanly possible. He plays the move here, e5, initiating massive tactical complications. The threat here is simply trading on d6, winning the pawn, and hitting the queen on e8. But if black takes the pawn, then the game opens up, and black's game gets very difficult very, very fast. Now, in the game, black here plays the move knight b4, jumping down with that knight, pressuring d5, but Magnus here has everything under control, and there are so many ways to win here. For example, the computer loves the idea. It's begging you to play the move here. Knight takes e7, sacrificing the knight. The point being, if the queen takes, you take on d6, hit the queen, and this pass pawn on d6 is so strong, white can even sack the piece, and he's still dominating the entire game. Now, instead, Magnus here goes for a simpler option, but still very, very strong. That is knight b to c7. Now, look at this move here. The queen on e8 is under attack. There's no way to trade the knight off. And even if you could, there's still one more knight on d5 defending it. So the queen, it's gotta move. You simply can't lose the queen on e8. You would think, right? You would think. So what can black do? If you go to, say, c8, that runs into knight takes e7, hitting the king and the queen. You lose the queen anyway. Instead, queen d8 also isn't that attractive. Why? There's so many ideas here. For example, you can still do the taking on e7 idea and just go knight takes, queen takes, d6, and so on, getting a fantastic game, trading on c5, winning that piece. So black here, no matter what he does, he's kind of losing material. So what does Klebovich do here? He goes out in style, and he plays the move here. Well, he doesn't move the queen. He plays the move knight takes d5, sacrificing the queen on the e8 square. He knows, I mean, no matter what you do, you are down massive material. The has laid a deadly trap for you in general. He's walked you into a deep, dark forest, and there's no way out. Therefore, he goes for the most complicated idea possible to at least get chances in a very complicated middle game. So he sacks the queen. Magnus here, he takes the queen. Knight takes e8 is the move, and black knight to e3, jumping in with the fork on the queen and the rook. Now, Magnus, this guy is the best in the world at many things, but especially keeping the game as complicated and difficult as possible for the opponent, essentially walking the opponent into a deep, dark forest or having them tread deep water in the ocean or the pool, whatever you want to have it. So here, what does he do? Well, queen d2, black trades on f1, and now he could just, for example, take knight. That'd be a simple option, right? Instead, bishop takes c5. Okay, trading off one more piece. Black here takes on e8, rook f takes e8. And again, white could simply say trade on f1, win back the pawn on c5 after d takes. But no, bishop a7 hits the rook. Magnus, despite being up a minute on the clock, up massive material, he still feels the need, the compelling need, to keep the game as complicated as possible at literally all times. It's really remarkable. Black here, knight takes g3 is the move, hits the king and the queen. You have to capture back. H takes is the move, and black takes on b3, rook takes b3. Now, in this position, let's slow down and do inventory. What the heck is going on right here? Well, it turns out white has, let's see, the queen versus... Is the computer misevaluating the material balance? I don't even know, but I would think white is up the queen versus the rook and the pawn. But let's keep going here. All right, a5 is the move, gaining space on the queen side here. We have d takes e5, and then f takes e5 is the response. Now here, rook to a3. Black knows he must get behind the passed pawn on the a5 square with that rook. Solid stuff. But again, Magnus, a6, he knows the pass pawn on the a file is by far the most important factor in the entire position. And he has these two Bs, the one dark squared one and the light squared one, slicing down these diagonals, trying to escort the pawn down to a7 and then down to the a8 square. I mean, as usual, Magnus just synergizing every piece in his position to absolute perfection. Mwah. All right, black, bishop c8, retreating and trying to target this pawn, but Magnus here, he's ready. Bishop b7. What is the idea? Wait a minute, isn't white giving up a bishop? For example, bishop takes, b takes, rook takes, that is the idea. Isn't he losing a bishop? Turns out not really. Rook to c8 effectively wins the game on the spot due to the pin on the rook and the threat of b8 promoting to a queen. Therefore, instead, black here, bishop e6 is chosen, sliding down, defending, and now Magnus, the final move of the game, simply bishop c5. And in this position, Magnus, he has literally over a minute left on the clock, and black taps out due to the clock. This is 3-0 Thursday. Both sides have 3 minutes to play literally all of their moves. There is no increment. There is no 1 more second per move. Oh no, it's 3 minutes for literally every single move here. And Klebovic, he taps out on the clock. He loses the game, but let's be honest. He didn't lose the game due to the clock. He lost the game because Magnus freaking Carlsen, the greatest player of all time, was his opponent in this game. And Magnus walked him into a deep, dark forest where, I mean, he just could not navigate the complications. And in the end, Magnus was just too much, keeping the game so complicated for so long. It really is amazing how much better Magnus is versus every other player. And it's only in these ultra complicated middle games where you really see just how big of a gap there is between, say, Magnus and a 29.04 international master on chess.com. Really remarkable stuff. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please smash that like button, comment down below what everyone says is all good, and let me know, do you like this new layout here that I have going on all over this area, you know? It's new, so maybe you guys like it, maybe you don't. Hopefully you do, but I digress. And by the way, if you want to learn directly from me, a 2000 ELO online player, by the way, my handle for online chess is down below right there, drmikechess1. But anyways, which is my online chess coaching program where I can work with you directly to help you reach whatever rating goal it is that you have, assuming it's not too much higher than, say, 2000 ELO where I am right now. But anyways, that's all for today. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I will see you, my friend, in the next video.